This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with former Wimbledon, Stevenage and Newport defender Fraser Franks. He discusses his time as a professional footballer, as well as the challenges faced along the way, his experience of playing for England, as well as his enforced transition away from the sport due to a heart defect. This episode of the podcast was also recorded over the internet, so may sound a little different to normal. I hope you enjoy. I guess, Fraser, first thing, how are things? How's life in lockdown and all that? Are you and the family well?
Yeah, can't complain. Got a 1-year-old that keeps me entertained. She's been crawling for about a month now and on the verge of walking, so that's a job in itself, looking after her and keeping an eye on her throughout the day, so that keeps me busy. And then I've still got other bits of work going on, so can't complain and keep myself busy and active.
And then obviously we spoke briefly before that you'd mentioned kind of some projects that you're doing at the moment. Do you just want to talk through exactly kind of what you're doing with yourself, kind of post-football, if you like?
Yeah, I went straight into, because I was living in the area, Bristol City got me in just to have a look around the training ground and meet some of their staff and see some of the roles that were at the club. And they brought me in as a first-team scout straight away. Just on a part-time basis, but it was brilliant for me really because it kept me in a routine almost where I was still involved in football and I was going to games on a Tuesday night and a Saturday and probably covering about 3 or 4 games a week. So I'm still doing that. Obviously, it's postponed during lockdown and there's some video analysis bits to look at, but I enjoy that side of it. And then the other side is working with a law firm actually. Which I probably didn't think I'd ever do. but yeah, they've got relationships with a lot of football clubs and work with the Premier League and some of the academies on delivering workshops surrounding education and social media and player welfare. So it's a side that I'm still learning and getting to grips with, but I really enjoy it, yeah. So on top of that as well, I'm studying for a master's degree at Salford University, so that's part-time as well, studying sport and directorship. So yeah, I've kept myself as busy as I can really, and that's what I wanted to do when I came out of the game.
Well, we'll probably come back to that properly later because it'd be interesting to hear kind of your transition into that world. I guess our paths first crossed when we used to play against one another when you were at Brentford. In terms of for you, your kind of childhood and playing and going through that phase, what did that look like? Who did you play for? How did you get into academies, all that type of stuff?
So I played just street football really from as early as I can remember. We had a little cage football pitch around my estate. We lived on that council estate in South London, so there was a lot of kids around the area that used to play out, and I was one of them that played out all day. And then just started playing for the school and district teams. And it was actually quite early. I played for my first club was Wandle Wanderers, a Sunday League team, and I joined when I was 8. And I only played for a season, and I was doing Chelsea development centres at the time. So just Chelsea football in the community, and it was like nothing to do with the academy or anything like that. It was just like a little development centre. We used to go once a week, but the funding got stopped for it, so it closed down. And because of that, they offered the 3 or 4 best players of each age group a trial for Chelsea's academy. So I didn't actually get scouted. I got put through that way while I was still playing. And yeah, I went on trials as an under-9 at Chelsea, and then stayed in the academy system for quite a long time after that.
For you, in that time, in terms of like your development and stuff, what type of things were you working on? Was it ball mastery and stuff, how it looks today, or was it different when you were growing up then?
It's definitely different to what I see these days. A lot in terms of organisation, travel, things like that. This is even away from the football. there was no expenses for parents or anything like that, which I think the kids get now. So my mum used to give me, like, take me on the bus and the train and that kind of thing, and I think you used to get like a Mars bar and a milkshake after training, which they probably don't do at Chelsea these days. But no, it was from what I remember, it was probably not as detailed as coaching is now. It was a lot of technique work, and I remember a lot of dribbling in and out of cones and little volleys and little headers and stuff like that, and small-sided games. But yeah, it's definitely, I'd say the coaching's definitely improved now. I've been in at Chelsea and looked at the setup and got a few friends that are coaching there now. So I think the kids have got it a lot better than we had it. But yeah, I absolutely loved it when I joined there.
And then obviously you went through, well, my understanding, you went through kind of foundation phase and youth phase and stuff. And then I think your journey there stopped at 16s when you were going for a scholarship. Is that right?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And then how was that transition for you? Obviously, you've been there for a long time, and that's probably something that happens quite a lot. And you have kids there from 8 and they go all the way through and then don't quite make that scholarship thing. How was that for you that time?
Yeah, I think going through the age groups, I think I signed there as a 9-year-old. But I went on trial with one of my friends who was also in the development centre, and he was an age group above. And I didn't really want to be on my own, so I actually made out I was an under 10. So I went on trial a year up just so I could be with my friend. I was a little bit nervous going in there. So for the first month, they didn't find out, and I was training with the under 10s. And then I remember they came up to me and it was like, you need to go down with the under 9s, and it probably really helped me actually, because felt like I was holding my own in that age group. And then when I went down to the under 9s, I was probably one of the better players at that age. I went there as a striker, and and then quickly worked my way backwards, I think. So they put me in midfield, and then I ended up I could head it quite well when I was a kid, so they ended up putting me at the back, probably about age 10. But no, going through the age groups, I always felt early I was one of the better players, and then I could see physically I was just getting dominated, and I hadn't had a growth spurt or anything. So when it came to the ages of 12, 13, 14, I could see that I was probably losing a little bit of confidence as well. I was quite a shy, nervous kid. And I could see there were bigger athletes coming in and people that were a lot quicker and stronger. And by the time it got to under 16, I was actually expecting to get released, and I didn't feel like I was good enough there at the time. So it wasn't really a shock when I did get released at 16.
So it's interesting, obviously now there's a lot of talk around kind of early developers or late developers and that type of stuff. Do you feel like physically you developed a little bit later on when you got into the YT, or is it that they were just kind of specimen and physically outstanding?
They were physically outstanding. I think it's when Chelsea first started putting money in, so we were getting a lot of lads coming over from Holland and France, and they were physically beasts at 14, 15, 16, and I hadn't had any kind of growth spurt. I think I went there as a 9-year-old, and I was quite a big kid at that age. But then everyone overtook me, and I didn't have a proper growth spurt, I'd say, until I was about probably 16, I reckon I was, and then started to shoot up a little bit more. But it still took me probably until the age of 18, 19, 20 to actually fill out a little bit more and, get a little bit more powerful and that kind of thing. So I was definitely, I'd say, a late developer in that sense.
Obviously, you kind of got released at 16s and you said you were kind of expecting it. How did you go about trying to find a new club? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, that's another thing I found is really different now, when you get a lot of help and a lot of care afterwards, which is great. I think the aftercare at most clubs that I speak to is brilliant. And yeah, when I look back, the conversation at first was a phone call with my mum, so I wasn't even involved in the release process. I remember her getting a phone call. They said, you're going to get a phone call at this time, and then they had a conversation with her on the phone, and that was it. I was released. But it seems strange now that I didn't really get the feedback from the coaches or anything like that yourself, and it was just a conversation with my mum, and she told me. But yeah, after that, it was almost a case of Chelsea said they would put my name around a little bit, and it was almost a case, I remember, of getting every club's email address and even their postal addresses, and I was handwriting to clubs and asking if I could get a trial and saying I'd just been released by Chelsea and all that kind of stuff. And I think there was only 3 or 4 that got back to me, but they all said, you have to be scouted this kind of way, and couldn't offer me a trial. And then out of the blue, I just had a call from Millwall for a trial there, and then one of my friends was at Brentford, and I'd spoken to a coach there, and I got a trial there. So I was on trial at Millwall and Brentford at the same time for probably about a month, I'd say, and then ended up Millwall wanted me to come back in pre-season, and Brentford offered me a contract, so I ended up signing for Brentford.
And then how was that transition going in as a newbie, if you like? I imagine you've probably gone in with some lads who had been there for quite a period of time and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, it was. I was made to feel welcome straight away. I remember that. The difference from Chelsea, had obviously, like facilities-wise and everything that comes with it, was, by the time I was 16, this was when Chelsea were winning leagues and Roman Abramovich had taken over, so the facilities and stuff were unbelievable. And then to go to Brentford, who were in League One at the time, and it was just like on a park pitch, floodlights that were going out and no kit and things like that. But I was never someone that really cared about that kind of stuff. It's somewhere where, as I said, I was really shy at Chelsea and nervous and didn't feel like I was good enough to be there. And then dropped down to Brentford and really gained a lot of confidence and probably found a little bit more belief in my ability. I needed to do that because, I felt comfortable playing with the players there. And yeah, as I say, I had the chance to go to Millwall in that pre-season, but once I had an opportunity to sign for Brentford, I loved it there. So I made that call.
And do you feel like you benefited in terms of coming in from Chelsea, having that reputation, or was that a bit of pressure on you to come in?
Yeah, probably a little bit, because I think back in those days, a lot of the youth teams lower down were taking, the Chelsea boys, the Arsenal boys, the Tottenham boys. I remember I think there was a lad from Tottenham and a lad from Watford and myself that came in at the same time. I think the good thing was Chelsea made their decision really early in the season, so I had the under-16s almost a year at Brentford before the YTS decision. So by the time we went into the YTS, I built up a good relationship with the players. I got to know the club well, and I'd seen some of the other lads that got released really late in the year and almost signed for Brentford without even having to trial or anything like that. They struggled quite a bit at first because it took them a while to adapt when we did all become full-time and, start that YTS.
And how was that transition for you? You mentioned full-time there in terms of going in full-time. Obviously, college, you went in a day a week or 1.5 days a week, or whatever it was. How did you find that, kind of being in and around the first team a little bit more and being able to commit to, I guess, strength conditioning and all that type of stuff?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely loved it. It's I think when I look back at those couple of years in the youth team, they're still like 2 of the best years of my life. I think that when I got that decision, as I said, I signed for Brentford, but when you get that decision to say, we're going to take you on as a YTS, it was just the biggest relief, really, because I didn't know what I was going to do if I didn't get that. I didn't have any backup plan. I'd have probably ended up, trying to go to college or sixth form or something like that, and something I was desperate to avoid at the time. But no, when we got the decision and became YTS players, and you training full time, I absolutely loved it. I loved being around the first team. I was always quite busy, so I was always trying to speak to senior players and build relationships. And even when I was cleaning boots and stuff like that, I was trying to get in with the first team and feel a part of it. And yeah, it was brilliant. I think training full time and being a footballer was the only thing I'd ever wanted to do. So to be able to do it and to live it was just, I loved every minute of it.
Do you think being, as you said there, kind of busy benefited you?
100%. I think in terms of players starting to know me around the building, members of staff, I say being busy, I used to always get sort of the mickey taken out of me I think because I was so obsessed with football. I knew for instance, your QPR team, I knew everyone's, like, I used to do my background on who was playing against, and I knew all the other scores and things like that from youth team games. With a lot of the lads, they had a lot better social life than me. I'd come through an all boys school, and my friends had started doing the wrong thing, so I literally cut out all of them, and so I didn't have any friends from away from football. And I remember when we had like a game called off or something, I'd be devastated because I knew I didn't really have anything to do outside of football, and the rest of the boys would be cheering and buzzing because they go to that house party or something like that. So I think that kind of helped me in a way because I was so driven at that age. But on top of that, being busy in terms of doing extras, and I was always someone that probably picked up the cones after we finished, and was always quite professional in what I ate and didn't drink alcohol or anything at an early age. So yeah, I definitely think it benefited me in a lot of ways being busy. I think people are sometimes too afraid at academies to step away from the crowd and go and practice something or go and speak to someone else because it's not seen as the cool thing to do. And you get a lot of players in academies and in first teams that will take the mick out of you and that kind of thing, and it almost stops a young player from doing something maybe because it's seen as not cool. But you speak to those lads that didn't do it later on in their career, and they all wish that they had done. So I think it's definitely something that helped me.
Where did you get that drive from?
I think it's built within, but I think probably my upbringing gave me it. I think having a sibling probably gave it to me. I had a younger brother who I could always go and play football with and compete with. I was always playing against older lads in my local area and things like that. And I just think through growing up in school, when people say, what do you want to be when you're older? It was only ever one answer. And people would always try and say, oh, you need to have a backup plan, or, not all kids become footballers. But I almost took that as, I almost got offended when someone would say that to me as a kid. And I was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. So I think I was always driven from the age of probably about 6 or 7 to become a footballer.
And then obviously you mentioned there about doing extras or staying out and doing and stuff. Did it ever get to a point where you were able to drag others out with you, where they'd stay out and do those extra bits as well?
I think in my second year as a scholar, I began to train with the first team a lot and was on the bench for the first team quite a lot and involved. So yeah, I think probably others maybe did a little bit after that, whether it's because of me or not, but maybe they saw what I was doing was actually working a little bit. And I just felt even at lunchtime and stuff, I'd always try and sit with a first team player, or we had players like, I remember Carl Court was at Brentford, who at the time he played for like Newcastle in the Premier League and Wimbledon, and these are people I've watched on TV a lot. So I'd always try and sit next to him and ask him questions. What was this like when you were there? How was Bobby Robson like as a manager and things like that? And from a really young age, I was doing that and always just wanted to be involved with the first team players because I looked up to him so much, I think,
it's interesting in terms of that drive to be able to go and ask questions or challenge people and stuff. And I think being able to ignore the social aspect of it is probably the hardest bit.
Yeah.
From what?
I say didn't have a social life. Once I became, as I said, I think when you're in school and you have, your mates are going out on a Friday night and stuff, there's only so much they can ask you. So they say, oh, do you want to come out? And I'd be like, oh, I've got a game tomorrow. Then it'd be next week, oh, are you coming out? I'd be like, no, I've got a game tomorrow. So then they stop asking you in the end. And because I'd seen they were, starting to smoke and drink and all that kind of stuff, I just knew that I had to take myself away from that particular group of friends who I had at the time. But once I became, as I said now, my best friends are from that youth team at Brentford, because there was such a bond that we had then. But they became my social life. So, I'd start socialising with them away from football, and that group of friends, they were all quite local to the club. So we had a real tight knit, probably 8 or 9 of us that would always, hang out after football and socialise and stuff.
And then in terms of like during that period, obviously you mentioned you had some good players that kind of came in and whatnot. Was there any coaches or players you particularly learned a lot from?
I think we had such a variety of coaches, and for a youth team, most youth teams only have one youth team manager. I think we went through four. So the first coach that brought me in as an under-16 at Brentford, Richard Dobson, just completely changed. I remember it now so clear. My mentality at Chelsea was, right, don't be the worst player on the pitch. And honestly, I can still remember going into games thinking that as long as I'm not the worst, or if you're doing a run, as long as I'm not last, if I'm second last, then that's fine for me. Whereas my mindset completely changed when I met him. And he was like, no, you've got to want to be the best. And, once I changed, literally just, it was like a switch went in my head that instead of accepting being second to last in the running or something like that, that I wanted to be first. And him putting that mentality into me completely changed my belief. He's gone on, the unfortunate thing was he got a job at Wickham. He went to Wickham, he's still there now actually. I think he's been there over 10 years as first team coach. So when we went through his YTS, he actually didn't stay with us. So we had who came in, who was like an army general, and he was there for about three months. And I say I look back and I loved every minute. I definitely didn't love that first 3 months under him. It was brutal, and yeah, he's one of the only managers I've not really got on with that well either.
Was there any reason for that, or?
Not particularly. I think it's, when I look back, like some of the stuff that used to go on he would be sacked for instantly now. And I don't know, I didn't say anything at the time, but I remember he used to try and humiliate some of the lads in front of, to try and impress the boys and things like that. And I was one that never really laughed at his jokes, and I didn't find it funny. So yeah, I didn't get on with him the most, but he left after about 3 months, and then we had Scott Marshall come in, who was brilliant. He's now under 23s manager at Reading. And then we had Darren Sarl come in, so that was my last youth team coach. And he was a top coach as well. And I ended up actually working with him in senior football about 10 years later. So I took bits, from each of those coaches. And, sometimes it can be a good thing to go through so many managers because you can pick up little pieces from each of them.
And then what about in terms of other players? Obviously, you mentioned Carl Court there. Was there any senior players or other youth team players that you were able to pick up little bits of information from?
I think Robin Nichols in my youth team, who you know well, was probably always someone that I probably looked up to a little bit. Even though we were the same age and in the same team, he was another one that was so driven. And I think if things were a little bit different at Brentford, he would have gone on and no doubt had a pro career. But everything he did off the pitch, so professional, and in our college work and stuff, he was just leaps and bounds ahead of anyone, and we used to always try and copy his work and things like that. But he's another one that he would do extras and didn't care if anyone called him busy. So he was another one. I feel like he had a similar mentality to me. And then in terms of the first team, we had some big players and big characters in there. I'm trying to think now. We had Kevin O'Connor, who is now Brentford first team coach, who came through the system, and he was a one club man. So he came through at Brentford and stayed there his whole career. He was always someone we looked up to quite a bit, I think, just because you could see the pathway that he'd taken. But then we also had some ex-Premier League players that started to filter down. So, as I said, we had Carl Court, Steve Cabbell's another one that I'm still quite close to that came in. He used to be at Watford and Sheffield United, who's now an agent, so I still speak to him on a regular basis. But yeah, we had some good senior pros, and as I said, I tried to take little bits of each of them, really, just because they were doing what I wanted to become.
And how important was it having kind of a good bunch of senior pros at the team? How important do you think that is in terms of like a team dynamic?
Yeah, it was great for us, especially in those youth team days, just because, they were almost like idols to look up to at the time. Even though, they were playing in League One and League Two, they were professional footballers, and some of them had played 500 games, and they were in their 30s, and it's just what we all wanted to become. I think in terms of having that, as I say, they were a senior bunch, but it was a lot different back then. And we mixed. There was only one building at Brentford, so we all mixed together, and it was quite brutal back in the day when there was a lot of initiations and a lot of jobs and that kind of thing. But nothing that went on that was too bad. But as I say, it can almost like man you up a little bit, and it definitely prepared me for that first team environment when I did step up.
Am I right in thinking that you got offered a year's contract after your YTS?
Yeah, so I'd started to become involved with the first team in my second year, but we never had a reserve team or an under-23 system like there is now. So you had to be ready to go from youth team straight into the first team and have an impact. There was only ever probably one contract getting handed out every year, and I look back at our youth team, we had some real good players. But yeah, luckily I was the one that got the pro contract, and that was one of the best days of my life when I got that. But it just didn't go as I'd wanted it to that first year. My first year as a professional, and I look back and it just wasn't what I'd hoped it would be.
Why was that?
I think the young lads weren't managed great. I think because we didn't have, I was 18, 19 at the time, but we didn't have a reserve team or an under-23 system. So we were training every day and, part of the first team, but I was only ever on the bench on a Saturday or not involved on a Saturday, and was never really managed particularly well. The focus was on the 11 starters at Brentford, and people that weren't playing didn't really get a look in. But yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. I became frustrated because I wanted to play, and I've been used to playing obviously all my life really, like playing on a Saturday. And my only outlet really was when I asked to go on loan, and ended up signing for Basingstoke Town in the Conference South. And I went there for 3 months and I actually really enjoyed it there. My first taste of senior football, and it toughened me up, but it also gave me a look into part-time football, and that almost gave me another drive of that I don't want to be training on a cold Tuesday night on an AstroTurf in a little cage. I want to be, out there playing full-time and, being a professional. So it gave me, it was a really good spell for me, and it was only 3 months, but it gave me a real good outlook onto, I need to work hard to become a professional footballer. And I'd also seen the lads that were playing for Basingstoke were good players, but just probably didn't look after themselves and weren't as professional, which is why they were playing at the level they were.
I guess 2 questions off the back of that. The first one is, during that first year of where you've gone from YTS to pro, and you mentioned there that motivation started becoming a factor because obviously you're not playing this stuff. Were you still trying to do extras at that point, or was that something that began to wane as well? And I guess the next question off the back of that is, what did you learn from going from YTS football to men's football? Was there anything in particular you can put your hat on and go, actually, that's a real big jump from under 18s to first team?
Yeah. I definitely think I still trained hard every day, and was doing all I could. But I was probably got to a stage where I was doing that for probably 6 months or 7 months, and felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And I probably did get a little bit demotivated and down tools, and was like, I don't want to be here anymore if they don't appreciate me and they're not, I remember all I ever wanted was like a little conversation, or, keep doing this and you'll get a chance or anything like that, but I didn't get anything like that, and it was quite cold at the time, but I definitely was deflated towards the end of it, and, probably in my head thinking I need to leave now. There was one stage where it was just humiliating for me, because I'd spoken to the manager and said, look, I really want to play. I've come back from Basingstoke and I want to be involved. And I almost became a little bit of a pain for him, I think, where I was desperate to play and desperate to be involved. And I think as a little lesson to me, whether it was a lesson or not, we travelled to Colchester away it was. And we'd only travelled with the numbers for a squad. So, you look around the bus and everyone, we had 18 players, so everyone was going to be involved. And he put 6 subs on the bench and left me in the stands. And just when he named that team, and I was like humiliated in front of the first. Like, I was a first team player, but I was humiliated, and I was like, nah, I need to leave this club. If this is how I'm going to be treated, and you know, he's not going to put me on the bench, and he's going to leave me in the stands when there's an opportunity to sit on the bench. I was like, what am I doing here? So that was probably about 3 months left of the season. So that is probably when I downed tools and was like, I don't want to be here anymore, and sulked a little bit maybe. But in terms of learning from youth team football to first team football, I think results is probably the main thing. It becomes a lot more about results and less about development. I think in the youth team, you'd lose on a Saturday, but it wasn't the end of the world. And, the coach's job was to produce players for the first team and not to win on a Saturday. I think when we stepped up to the first team, it didn't matter how you were developing really, as long as we were winning on the Saturday. So I think the results and maybe the egos a little bit on top of that as well when you go into first team environment. That was probably the biggest difference from youth team to first team football I found.
So I guess going back to your first story, was there ever any explanation as to why that took place, or was it just kind of, I've done it, get on with it?
Yeah, no, there was never any explanation. He's actually, the manager at the time is actually someone I cross paths with quite a lot now and speak to, and he's actually a nice guy to speak to. But just during that year, like, I just did not enjoy it, and it's something that I completely forgot last time I met him, but something I'm hoping that he still remembers and I can speak to him about. But no, there was never any explanation. Someone told me that it was maybe a message to the board because he was implying that he needed money for new transfers. But if that was the case, then I'd have been fine if he told me that. It was never explained to me or anything like that, or if I was just indirectly, you're not in my plans, so I'm not putting you on the bench, that kind of thing. I'm not too sure. But I just remember I was sat in the change room on my own, and I was like, what is going on here? I was like, I just could not get my head around it. But that was another thing, the politics that go with first team football when it comes to trying to get players out and trying to move players on. It just becomes, it becomes a little bit, not a nice place to be at times.
So I guess along with that, you've mentioned kind of the difference between it being development football to performance-based results football. For you, obviously you're 18 or 19 at the time, and you're still appreciating the fact that there's hopefully development there, that you're trying to get on the pathway.
Yeah.
How are you balancing that out? How are you balancing your individual development with obviously also wanting to perform so you get to play, or if you're on loan or something, obviously wanting to perform so you get to stay in the team and stuff? How do you balance that as a player?
I do think we had a really good strength and conditioning coach who almost became like a friend to a couple of the boys that weren't involved on a Saturday. So when I wasn't on loan, we'd have a session with him on a Saturday morning and, try and ask him for extras, because at that time I was really skinny and I was a centre-back, so I was trying to bulk up, and I was doing extra sessions with him on a regular basis. But on top of that, when I was at Basingstoke, I'm not sure if it happens now with lads that go to part-time clubs, but I was training every day at Brentford and then going to Basingstoke of a Tuesday night and a Thursday night on top of that. So I was doing a lot of training. I'd train with Brentford on a Tuesday, then I'd hang around for a little bit and then drive to Basingstoke and train there in the evening. So I was doing a lot and I was lifting a lot and that kind of thing. So that year, because I wasn't probably playing on a Saturday as much, I almost used it to try and bulk up a little bit.
And did you manage to do that heading into the following season?
I think so, yeah. I managed to put on a bit of weight, and I think the experience as well, going to Basingstoke, and I was able to test that against men, and I think I played 20 games, so that was my first real taste of first team football, and I was actually competing against big strikers and getting elbowed and broken nose and that kind of thing. So I think that, looking back, that year definitely toughened me up in all aspects, really.
And obviously you got to the end of the year, didn't stay with Brentford, kind of moved on to Welling, is that right?
No, I went to AFC Wimbledon after Brentford. So I was released at the end of the season, and it was, it was one of them. I knew it was coming, and something I actually in the end wanted to happen. Obviously because I said felt humiliated and that kind of thing at Brentford. But I was only offered a contract at Basingstoke, really. So I was struggling for another full-time club. But then I had the opportunity to go on trial at AFC Wimbledon just through the goalkeeper at Brentford. He used to play with the Wimbledon manager. So he got me in on trial. And yeah, I went there and really dedicated myself off season because I knew that trial was coming up. And I ended up staying on trial for about a month. And then, yeah, signed for AFC Wimbledon after that.
And then how was that year for you in terms of playing a little bit more from what I saw and kind of still being in full-time football but in a slightly different setting and whatnot? How was that?
That was brilliant, and it gave me a real love for football again. I think I lost it a little bit in that last 6 months at Brentford, but as soon as I stepped in at Wimbledon, I knew that was where I wanted to be. I felt like it was if I didn't get in at Wimbledon, I was going to sign for Basingstoke Town, so I was going to become a part-time player, and I felt like I worked really hard to become a professional footballer. I didn't want to give it up. So AFC Wimbledon were in the conference at the time, but it was full-time at a really professional environment and club. And yeah, gave me a massive boost when I signed for them. And then I was still on the fringes. I was signed as a young third-choice centre-back, so I wasn't the starting one. But there was a game. It probably took me about eight or nine games during this at the start of the season to get involved, and then two of the centre backs came down with illness overnight, and I was just chucked in for my debut, and it was against the top of the league, and it was on TV. Just literally about an hour before kickoff, manager said, "Right, you're in. It's your debut. Like, give you a chance." I ended up doing really well and got man of the match in my debut. So I think it's one of them. If I'd been given maybe 48 hours notice or something that I was playing, I might have overthought it a little bit. But it was chucked on me an hour before kickoff. I wasn't expecting to play, and he just said, "Right, you're in." And I stayed in pretty much after that, and I think that season ended up playing about 25 games, maybe, something like that.
And in terms of your psychology and whatnot, are you the type of person that would overanalyze stuff? Would you get worked up before, or are you generally more laid back and be able to deal with situations quite well?
No, in my younger years, I was really used to overthink everything. I think that's where I say I didn't have too much of a social life away from it. So football was just, I didn't have any other interests really. All I did was watch football and play football. So any bad game that I had or anything like that, it would haunt me for days and days and days, and it would, I'd take it home with me. Or, on the other hand, if I scored or we had a good game or I'd won, I'd be on cloud nine for days on end. So I used to get, the older I got, it was never too high, never too low. Don't get carried away with wins and good performances, and don't get too down. But at that point, I was just so up and down of extremes and extreme highs and extreme lows. And yeah, I was quite a nervous child growing up, and quite timid and anxious. So I always used to take that in with me into games, really. So it wasn't until the age of probably 21, 22 that I started to relax a little bit and, become more laid back going into games, and started to believe in myself probably a little bit more.
And was there any particular strategies for you to develop that skill?
I just think it came with experience with me. And also I tried to have other interests in, I think especially when I met my wife later on in my career, it gave me, I could come home and, I wasn't speaking about football with her. So it gave me a little switch off, and little other things in my life allowed me to switch off. So that was good. But I think it came with experience, and it also came with probably some of the setbacks that I had. I think, I say I was in the team at Wimbledon and doing really well, and we were top of the league or second in the league. And then I did my ACL, so did my cruciate, and ended up missing the playoffs and the playoff final, and we ended up getting promoted. But I was out for the best part of the year, and I think during that year, you have a lot of time to reflect and to think on things. And I probably appreciated football more when I came back, and that I didn't need to get so worked up before games or so anxious afterwards and overthinking and overplaying things in my head. So I think that injury probably helped mentally going forward as well.
It's strange, isn't it? Because some people say that injuries for them are the real downturn where they really struggle to have confidence going back. For you, it's almost a positive because you realised you can have other interests but still be driven with your football.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think it made me appreciate it probably more. That I've never had an injury before, and to have one that was so serious, it kept me out for so long. Football was taken away from you, and it was one tackle away at Grimsby, and that was it. It was taken away from me. So it's a hard place to be when you're going in day after day, and you're on a different timetable to the players and different schedule, and you can see them going out and mixing and having fun and going on away trips and tours, and you're not part of it. So it is tough, and it's a lonely old place when you're one of the only injured players and you're with the physio all day. But it does give you that, probably adds to the drive and does make you appreciate that when you are fit, don't take it for granted.
And then obviously for you, as you mentioned there, Wimbledon that year got promoted, which is obviously a massive positive for you and all the players and the club. I imagine it was a little bit difficult considering you couldn't be a part of that. How was it when you then came back the following season as a League Two player again and kind of in the football pyramid?
Yeah, so I've missed the playoff final, but the staff there really went out of their way to make me feel part of it. And looking back at that playoff final is still one of the best days I've had in football, even though I was on the side. I was in a knee brace and crutches, but as soon as we scored the winning penalty, they went up in the air and I was sprinting on the pitch and stuff like that. So they really made me feel part of it. But yeah, I was really determined to get back in the league, just to almost prove Brentford wrong. I dropped into non-league, and within a year I was back. So I came back with real drive and determination. And I remember I hit the ground running in training. I came straight in and I felt fit straight away. I felt not match fit because I wasn't playing. I felt fit and I was one of the better players in training, and I was like, right, I can pick up where I left off because I was doing well before I got injured. But the manager was always hesitant of putting me in. And he said, I want to send you out on loan before you come back in. And there was a chance for me to go to Forest Green at the time on loan, which would have been like a full-time club. They were doing well in the conference at the time. But he wanted me to go to Hayes and Yedding, which was a part-time club in the conference, but it was so I could train with Wimbledon and still play games. And it's one of the only times that I look back with a little bit of regret, because I went there with the complete wrong attitude. I was a little bit annoyed because I felt I was ready to play for Wimbledon again, and I didn't want to go, back into the conference especially with that team. I went there to training on the first night, and I was like, it was just a shambles. There were so many players. It was so unorganised, and I didn't want to be there in the first place. So I probably took that into my games and didn't do myself justice in that month that I went there. Sulked a little bit because I didn't want to be there. And it probably hindered me a little bit when I came back from loan to Wimbledon, because I was so frustrated that, I'd been out for a season and I'd seen everyone at Wimbledon doing well, and I just wanted to be part of that team again. And to be sent on loan to a team that I didn't want to go to, and I just went with the wrong attitude, and I should have just got my head down, done that month, came back and tried to push, but it set me back a little bit, and I ended up going on loan again to Newport County, which didn't work out for me either. That was a strange one because you can only have 5 loan players in a squad, in a matchday squad, and at Newport we had 8 players on loan at the club, so 3 loan players had to miss out every week. So I was there as cover for an injured centre back, and once he came fit, I couldn't get in the squad because 3 of us had to miss out. So that was another frustrating time for me. And then I came back and I ended up playing probably the last 4 or 5 games of the season at Wimbledon. But again, I probably sulked a little bit because I wasn't in the team and felt I should have been. And I was only 21 at this point. And I remember having a conversation with the AFC Wimbledon manager at the end. And he just said, look, you've had a year out and, you've had a game here and a game there. I just feel like you need to go and establish yourself somewhere and get a little bit more experience. So I ended up leaving AFC Wimbledon that second year.
Was that then when you went to Welling?
That was, yeah. So that was that was a tough summer really, because I'd had a really good year at AFC Wimbledon the year before when I got injured, and I was getting linked to a couple of clubs and probably getting carried away with that a little bit myself, thinking I was maybe going to get a move somewhere. To a year later being released by them. But every club I spoke to that summer was saying, "Oh, you're too inexperienced for a centre back. You've only played 30 games or whatever it was." And every club was coming back with the same thing. Every full-time club that was. And I just said I just knew. I said, like, I've got one more chance. I need to go away. I need to go somewhere I know I'm going to play week in, week out, enjoy it, that kind of thing. The only bad thing for me was it was part-time. So I ended up signing for Welling just because I'd spoken to their manager, Jamie Day, and he was just brilliant. He was an ex-Arsenal player, used to coach with Eddie Howe at Bournemouth. Them two are best friends. So the way he described football to me and that kind of thing and what he could do, he just said, "Look, come here, get your head down." He was like, "I've watched you play. All you need to do is have a good season here and you'll be back in the league." And that's obviously where I wanted to be. And it ended up being one of the best decisions I made. I had to swallow my pride a little bit because I was seeing some of my friends go off. If I look back at my time at Chelsea, some of them lads were now playing in the Champions League and in the Premier League and stuff. And I was having to drop down to part-time football. So I had to swallow my pride a little bit and do that. But yeah, I got my head down and luckily it paid off.
And then obviously you spent that year, you played a lot, and I imagine doing quite well in that group. I'm right in thinking you played for England C during that period as well?
Yeah, so I signed for Welling in the Conference South, and we, as I say, it was a really good year because we ended up winning the league and get a promotion into the conference. That year was the most dedicated I've ever been to football. Say I was dedicated before, but this was just, because I was part-time, I was training on my own and almost pretending I was full-time still. So I made sure, I knew, I think social media was quite a big thing for me back then. And I could see some of my friends were like Snapchatting themselves, going to training and being with the lads and stuff like that. And I missed it, and I was like, right, I'm just going to almost pretend in my head that I'm still a full-time player. So I used to get up at the same time I would get up to go to training, drive to a park, bag of balls and cones and do my training, then go to the gym, come back and recover, that kind of thing, and then train with Welling in the evenings. And I just dedicated myself so much that year just because I did know that was my last chance. If I could have been one of these players that dropped into part-time, ended up, like some of the other lads, not living right and not really being professional, and could have gone and got a job and tried to earn a bit more money and just settled for that. But I moved back home to my mum's, which took a bit of financial pressure off me. That meant I could just play part-time football and focus on it. And yeah, we won promotion with Welling and got called up to the England C team at the end of the season. And that was really big for me because it was almost like a reward for what I'd done that year.
And how was that experience? I mean, representing your country at any level was pretty special, I imagine.
Yeah. It was incredible. It was Bermuda away was the fixture, so I couldn't believe it. It was like a week in the Caribbean. But a lot of people don't know this about like the FA, the way they do it. So they treat every England team or every England representative as exactly the same. So we were like, first, travel was unbelievable. You get equipment, hotels, everything was like top class. And I just couldn't believe it. It was just going from, I was playing obviously part-time at Welling at the time, to being treated like that as an England player and wearing the kit and singing the national anthem before games. And if I look at that squad, it was a ridiculous squad that we had. And I think there's been about 4 or 5 that have gone on from that non-league England C team to play in the Premier League. And
who was in it?
I think we had 16 or 18 that were in the squad, and I think 15 players ended up getting a move into the Football League after it. So we had Andre Gray, who's at Watford at the minute, Sam Clucas, who played in the Premier League for Swansea, Stoke, he's at Stoke now, Andy Yeardham, is at Reading. We've got Marcus Maddison at Hull. Mark Roberts is at Birmingham. Angus MacDonald, where is he now? He's at Hull as well, I think. So you had probably about 10 players that ended up playing in the Championship or higher. Matty Taylor, he's at Bristol City. And for me, it was like a little shop window, because it was all the lads that were under 23 that were doing well in non-league, and it allowed clubs to come and view those players, and yeah, it was brilliant for me, because I ended up getting 5 caps on 5 different occasions. So just great experience, like something that at the level that I played at, I've never experienced, going to Bermuda, and we played Czech Republic away, Slovakia away, countries that I'd never would have experienced and things I'd never would have done. And it's just a brilliant thing for non-league players.
And how did you find out about it? What was that process?
That was through my manager at Welling. So he phoned me at the end of the season, said I was on I think there was an initial 30-man squad, and then it got whittled down to 18. And yeah, that just all came through him, and it was something that I'd never really even thought of. It was just after the season had ended, and then we got sent. The England C manager had sent a training program to keep ourselves fit and stuff. And then yeah, that was it. The next call I had was I was selected, and that we were travelling about a week later to Bermuda.
And then in that environment, is there anything that you learned about yourself, or was there any like common threads between you guys as a group, looking at what you guys were aiming for?
I definitely learned a lot about myself. It's probably the first time. The England C manager was Paul Fairclough, and he was brilliant because he only got us for a small period of time, and he wanted everyone to knit and become almost like a club. So there was a lot of I'd never had to do it before, like standing up and speaking in front of the group, and it taught me that a little bit, and it gave me my first real experience of that, and I probably took that with me as, you know, in terms of like a leadership skill as I got forward. A lot of the things we did were like you had to interview each other and then stand up and speak about the other person, what they'd experienced in their life. Some of the common threads were, you know, it was 18 lads that were in non-league football who were all under 23 and who were all desperate to become, you know, professionals, whatever league that would have been in. You know, I'm not sure I would have believed that some of them would go on to play in the Premier League, but it just shows how driven and how talented that group was. But I think just being around those sort of characters, I learned a lot of some of the other players, just some of how they looked after themselves, what they were going through in their own, you know, because none of us were where we wanted to be. A lot of them had been rejected from other clubs and were desperate to bounce back. So it just gave me a real good core group to learn off of and see that some of these were going to be top players. So that gave me someone else to learn from.
And do you think that all of them kind of had a similar drive to you, where they were doing those extras and doing those important bits away from the club that helped them develop and go higher in the pyramid?
I think the majority were, yeah. I think that's what separated probably us from, which is why we got, you know, called into the England C team. A lot of them, you know, some of them can get away with it and it comes naturally, and then, you know, the ones I've always been jealous of. But no, you could see the ones that were dedicated and that were so determined to, you know, to progress their careers. And
then from moving on from that, what was your next club and how did that come about?
So we went back to Welling. That summer at Welling, I had the opportunity to go to Barnet, which was under Edgar Davids at the time. But there was all sorts going on at that club, and Welling didn't want me to go, and they'd almost said to me, look, we want you to go and get your move, but this ain't the place for you to go. But they'd just come down to the conference as well. Although they were full-time and Edgar Davids was manager, which was a draw for me, I ended up staying at Welling for another... I'd signed another 1-year contract at Welling, but had a buyout clause in it. So any team that bid that, Welling would let me go. And I don't know how, but that got into the non-league newspaper around January time. And then I had Welling contact me and said, I think it was 4 clubs that had activated my release clause. So then I could speak to speak to different clubs and see where I wanted to move on to. And I ended up, it was Forest Green, Colchester, Stevenage and Luton. And I'd gone to pretty much all of them and had a look around the training grounds and stuff like that. But when I went to Luton and saw their fan base in the stadium, and it was in January time and Luton were top of the league and looking like they were going to get promoted, and I wanted to be a part of that. So ended up signing for them.
And then how was that transition for you? Obviously moving club, you've done well at Welling, and how was that moving across?
Looking back, it was quite tough for me. As I said, I dropped into Welling and established myself and played every week, and I was, without being big-headed or anything, I was a big fish in a smaller pond there, and I felt, although I was only 22, I was captain most weeks, and I felt really confident at Welling. And then I was going from that into a big club with a lot of senior players and a lot of egos really in our squad at the time. And because it was a January move also, they were already top of the league and I was coming in. It was quite tough. Add into that the pressure of playing for Luton, which is, I was playing for Welling in front of maybe 1,000 people. From them playing every week in front of 10,000 for a club like Luton who were in the conference, and everyone could see that they should have, they were a League One Championship club, and the fans knew that, so they were desperate to get out, which added a lot of pressure on games. And I went there and I started really, really well, and I think we won my first 5 games and kept 5 clean sheets, and I started doing really well. And then I remember I had a game on TV that I had a nightmare in, and we lost. But I stayed in the team for the rest of the season. But there was a few games. There was an issue where I let my man score from a corner, and it became this massive issue. Every week we'd work on it so intensely that it ended up being something that I'd go in my mind. I was like, right, don't lose your man. And it was something that, I should have been so much more free going into a game, and I shouldn't have had that worry in the back of my head. But it was just, I think the difference going from Welling to Luton was just so big for me. And Welling was just, you could play with as much freedom as you wanted. I was doing really well, but I was still making mistakes, but I was allowed to make mistakes and I was allowed to do certain things. But I think the pressure that came with Luton, the management style was completely different. Probably not someone I clicked with really as a manager. The first, I went there in January and we had 20 games left, and I ended up playing 19 of the games, and I think we won probably 14 of them and ended up getting promoted. So I did, there were periods there where I loved it, and obviously when we got promoted, they were, great days and some of the best days, and something I, was massively proud of at the time. But it was just, if I look back at my time at Luton, and I just didn't enjoy it. It's a hard one to explain. I didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped I would have. It was everything I'd wanted. Like I'd dropped into non-league and dedicated myself, and now got this big move that I wanted, but it just wasn't what I pictured it to be.
From what you're saying, it seems like coaches and managers can have a real impact on their teams and how their players are and whatnot. Obviously, you mentioned your YT coach who changed your mindset to not wanting to be last, to being the best, to obviously your gaffer at Welling who's kind of allowing you the freedom to go and play and all that type of stuff. Do you think that's something that you found throughout your career, that managers can have a real effect on what the team environment looks like and the psyches of players going into games and whatnot?
Like huge impact. I think it was John Steele at the time at Luton, and we had a big squad, and we had like some people on, for the level, like big money, and there was egos and that kind of thing. And it was an environment where it was another one of them. It was brutal, and if you made mistakes, you were, they were brought up in front of everyone, and you were punished. And I used to hate the Monday morning meeting that you come in, you'd be like, all weekend I'll be thinking, oh, if I've made a mistake, that's getting highlighted in front of everyone, and I just didn't like that kind of thing. I felt there was a way of doing things, and as much as it needs to be said, if you've done something wrong, then yeah. But there were times where you just pull someone into the office and just go through a DVD with them or something like that and make it personal rather than trying to humiliate someone in front of a team, which was never something that I liked when I saw managers do it. There's a time and a place for it, but not something I was massive on. But I think for me, especially in my younger days, I think man management was, if I was managed well by a coach and felt a bit of love and felt valued, then they got the best out of me without doubt. But when I didn't feel that, then it's probably when I didn't enjoy it as much.
Sorry, you got to the end of that season. Did you stay at Luton for another season, or what did that look like after promotion?
I did, yeah. I stayed there, and I signed a 2.5-year deal, so I'd stayed there. And as I said, I played near enough every game when in the conference when we got promoted. So I was still a key part of the team. I just didn't have a great relationship with the management at the time. Just in terms of, I felt I was being restricted in how I was playing, and for a centre back, they just wanted me to head it and kick it out the stands and that kind of thing. But at Welling, I'd been confident to do a little bit more than that. And then that next season, you could just see that he was bringing in more experienced players and players he'd worked with in the past. And I think we had a squad of about 35 players in the end. So when we were in League Two, and I think I played probably 15, 20 games in League Two. And then got to the end of that season and had a conversation with John Still and just said that I've got a year left on my contract, but I need to leave. I need to go and play regular football. I'm not enjoying it here. And he agreed. And then, yeah, luckily I'd done enough in that time to stay in the league and sign for Stevenage in League Two.
And am I right in thinking Teddy Sheringham was manager of Stevenage then?
Yeah, he was. So as I said, I had a year left at Luton, and Stevenage and Luton were both in League Two. So one thing I didn't want to do was drop back at it just felt every time I got to League Two or in the Football League, I'd never quite do enough and I'd have to drop down again. And it had happened 2 or 3 times now, and I was like, I worked so hard to get to league, become a Football League player, that I didn't want to go back down. And then I got a phone call from Teddy Sheringham saying that he wanted to sign me at Stevenage, and I was just, I couldn't believe it. When he phoned me, and I was like, this is one of my, the Euro 96 stuff's on at the minute in lockdown, and just seeing how good he was as a player. And he was, as I said, I was a striker growing up, and he was like one of my heroes. So to get a phone call from him saying that he'd seen me and he wanted to sign me I was over the moon with that.
And how was it working with him? Because I imagine obviously he's worked with some of the best around, Fergie and stuff at United. Was there anything you learned particularly with your time with him?
He was brilliant for me. Real good coach, but it just didn't. I think the level with him, he's been an elite player and in elite environments, and I think he struggled when people didn't meet his standards. I think he was so used to everything being so professional and top class players. The year before, he was coaching at West Ham, so he still was involved with Premier League players. And I think when he dropped down to manage a League Two team, I think he felt frustrated at times that some of the players couldn't execute what he was used to, and he didn't know the level probably as well as some of these managers have managed hundreds of games in League Two, and he probably didn't know the level and the opposition players as much as some of the others. So it just didn't work out for him. But in terms of a coach, he was brilliant for me, and I learned loads from him. And again, I didn't stop being busy, and he's someone that I would always ask questions. I'd always ask him questions about Champions League at Man United and Euro 96 and things like that. And just to be in the presence of someone that's been at the top of his game, could always take loads and loads from him. He was still in the gym and he was still in great shape himself as well. So,
and in terms of sessions and tact, was there anything that you picked up that was you kind of held with you for the rest of your career?
I think particularly the strikers did. Some of his finishing drills and stuff were ridiculous.
Like what? What would they do? Try to explain.
Well, he would join in, so his finishing was incredible. I just remember little tight boxes, and the emphasis was more on your first touch than the actual shot and getting the ball manipulating the ball where you want it. Also, his heading, for someone of his size, he never smashed the ball with his head and was powerful, but glancing headers and getting yourself in the right position for the forwards, he was brilliant. And for me, obviously because he's been a forward, he would tell me what he found tough in defenders and come and, put himself against me in training and, tell me some of the stuff that top defenders did to him over the years. So little things on corners he was really cute at, getting half a yard from your man and stuff like that. So he's someone that I think could still bounce back and become a real good coach. After leaving Stevenage, he went and managed in India for a little bit. But yeah, I definitely think he should still be involved in football.
And then obviously you stayed at Stevenage for 3 years, is that right?
Yeah, 3 years.
And obviously over that time, regular in the team, did quite well, from my understanding.
Yeah, something, I never wanted to be one of these players that bounced around from club to club all the time. And I think I went there and I was 24 when I signed for Stevenage. And I just wanted somewhere to just settle and, I could actually build a relationship at a club with the fans, move to the area and settle down for a bit. And I'd always had like a little tick list of things I wanted. I'd always wanted to, I wanted to win promotions, and I'd managed to do that before. I'd always wanted to win a Player of the Year award somewhere, and I managed to do that at my first year at Stevenage. I'd always wanted to play over 100 games for a club, and I managed to do that there. And just wanted to establish myself as a Football League player, because I've been up and down from non-league for quite a while and trying to become it so much that once I played 100, 150 games in the Football League, I felt like, right, I've established myself here now, and I'm a Football League player, which I'd always wanted to be.
So then, kind of after that period, you've gone to Newport. What was behind the decision to go across there? What made you move across quite away from London as well? Was obviously where you'd spent a lot of your career and whatnot.
It got to the end of the 3 years, and we'd had, Teddy brought me in, and he got the sack, and then Darren Saul, who was my old youth team manager, took over, and he was really good for me, and I had him for two and a bit years, and then he got the sack, and then it was just a changeover, and behind the scenes with the club, new manager came in, and it was someone that I knew from before that knew how they worked, and I just thought, this is not going to be good for my, how I play football. And it just felt like there was a core group of us that stayed there for a few years and could just tell it needed freshening up. So he offered me a contract when he first came in, and I just said to him, I spoke to my wife and just said, just feel like I need something different now. I feel like, I've been there 3 years and I want a new challenge. And, I was coming to the end of my contract, and Newport phoned me, and they'd just missed out on the playoffs in League Two and were pushing for promotion. So I spoke to their manager, and he offered me a good deal, and said I'd be the main centre back and stuff like that. So yeah, I went and signed and moved to Wales.
And then how was that transition for you? How did you find it over there? Obviously, at this point, you're a little bit more senior as well in terms of your age and your position in squads, etc.
No, yeah, I loved it. You can probably tell it's a little bit of a common theme where if I feel a little bit of love from the club or from a manager, it means a lot to me, and I play my best football, and management, fans and chairman and everyone just made me feel like so welcome when I got there. Made me feel like I was such a crucial part of the team that yeah, I thrived under it, and probably played some of my best football in those days at Newport. And yeah, away from it, we moved to Wales, and it was a complete change of scenery, and I just loved everything about everything it was like I was starting fresh, and I'd gone to Stevenage as an up and coming player trying to establish myself, and now I was going to another club already established and felt comfortable at the level and felt more like a senior player and a leader that I thrived under it, and yeah, I loved every minute of Newport.
And is there anything that obviously we mentioned earlier about the senior players in squads and how big an impact they had in your career in terms of the environment they'd set. Is there anything that you tried to implement at your later days at Stevenage and then at Newport to make sure kind of the younger players were thriving or anything like that?
It's something I 100%. I felt like I took it on. I probably took it on at Luton actually, and I could see, that some of the youth team players there, and there's some top young youth team players, and they were still they would clean our boots and stuff like that. So I built relationships that way. And my boot boy was actually James Justin, who's at Leicester now and playing for England under 21s, and has gone on to, he's a Premier League player now. So someone like him who was such a nice kid and so talented, he's probably the one that I maybe started off with, where I was like, right, maybe I can help him out a little bit and advise him and give him a few tips of what he can do, get him involved with the first team boys a little bit. And yeah, I definitely felt like I took that on. At Stevenage particularly, we used to get a lot of loan players from Premier League clubs. So you get young lads coming in from Tottenham and Arsenal and teams like that. So I'd always try and help them, because I knew what it was like, being that loan player coming in and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's something I actually really enjoyed and got a lot of pleasure out of helping some of these young players. And as I say, it's probably something I could have done with a little bit more as I was coming through. Although at Brentford we did have a good group, but something I probably could have done with a little bit more.
Was there any particular ways you used to do that?
I think with some of them, it would be little things after training. I remember there was a young lad at Newport coming through, Jay Forston, who's played a few first team games now, but you could just see, because he was a centre back and he had the sort of mentality that I liked, I warmed to him a little bit, and I'd see him do little things in training that I used to do when I was inexperienced, and just used to take him after training for 5-10 minutes, do a few extras with him. I did my B licence at that time as well, so I'd done a little bits of coaching here and there. So I used to like having, if you had a young player that was willing to learn and had the right attitude, I used to love trying to do little extras to help them.
And then obviously the key thing you said there is that willingness to learn. I guess over the clubs you've been at and stuff, you've seen plenty of youngsters who are talented and maybe don't have that willingness to learn or want to work hard and stuff. As a senior player, how did you find that when you've got these players you're probably looking at going, got all the talent in the world but just aren't putting everything together? How was that for you?
Frustrating, just because if I look at myself as a player, I think I probably got to the level where my ability was, I think I was probably a League 1, League 2 player, and I feel like I maximised what I had. Physically, I wasn't strong and I wasn't quick. Athletically, I wasn't this specimen that could have got me to the next level, I don't think. I think when you get to Championship, Premier League, you need to be quicker and stronger than I was, and physically a lot better. And some of these lads were coming in from Premier League clubs with all the tools to become Premier League players, but just not the mentality to push themselves and get the most out of themselves. So that was something I remember. One lad in particular, I won't mention him, but he came from Arsenal and tried so hard to get him, because I could see the path he was going down, to try and get his head switched on and for him to realise what he had, and it just couldn't click. I think as much as you try, some people just don't take it in until it's too late, and unfortunately I don't think he's got a club at the minute. But I think when you have got that willingness to learn, those are the lads that often overtake the ones with all the ability in the world but no drive or no desire about them to get to the top.
Obviously your time at Newport kind of came to a pretty abrupt end. Do you just want to talk through kind of that process and what actually happened to you? And just explain basically what happened.
We'd had a good FA Cup run at Newport, something I'd never really done. Always got to like the third or fourth round and drawn like a team in our league or something like that. So we ended up playing against Leicester and beat them. Then we played against Middlesbrough and beat them. And we were in the last 16 of the FA Cup. So we played Manchester City at home on the Saturday, and we got beat 4-1, but they put out a top team. And then we played against Notts County on Tuesday, and I played in that, and I came off with about 10 minutes to go, just feeling a little bit lethargic. And then just the day after, I came down really ill. Just thought I had like a virus or getting the flu or something like that. Had a temperature and just was like sweating and shivering at the same time, that kind of thing, and took myself off to bed. And then I began getting like chest pains and sort of heart palpitations, and something I'd not really experienced before. So my wife was pregnant at the time, so I ended up just nudging her in bed saying that I said, "You're going to have to take me to hospital, I think," because it literally felt like my heart was pumping through my chest at a ridiculous rate. And then when I got to the hospital and they took my heart rate, and it was sky high. So they rushed me through, and they thought I had sepsis at first, which is like an infection in the blood. They put me on a drip and antibiotics and that kind of thing, and managed to get my heart rate down. But I stayed in there for about 10 days, and I contracted an infection around my heart. But once they'd scanned my heart, they'd seen an issue that I had with that aorta, which is the main artery for the heart and the main artery for pumping blood through the body. And yeah, just had seen an issue that I had with that, which meant any excessive exercise was gonna, wasn't really safe. And yeah, within about 10 days, the cardiologist at the hospital was saying, I had to retire from football immediately. Couldn't give me the go ahead to, be a professional footballer and being, pushing myself every day. But obviously I didn't want to accept it, and so Newport had sent me to like top specialists around the country. So that took about 2 weeks to get the results back, and when they came back, everyone just saying it was too risky for me, how my heart is at the moment to go back to playing. So yeah, I was forced to retire in the March when I was 28. Yeah, so yeah, it was tough.
During, like, when you're signing for different clubs and you're going through that process, had you had heart scans and stuff beforehand or not?
So I'd had a heart scan at age 16 when I was a whitey at Brentford. We all had to have them. And
the ECG, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've had that one as well, yeah.
So I remember we were training, and I got pulled out of training. And I was like, what's going on here? And they got sent to the manager's office, and they were like, right, they've seen something on your heart scan. There's like nothing to worry about. It's just an irregular heartbeat, but we're going to go and send you off for tests. So at 16, I was like, then I was almost fearing that I was going to have to, I weren't going to get taken on at Brentford. It was pre-season at this time, and this was classed as our medical, and they were pulling me out of training, saying that you can't do any training until we've got this checked out. So I remember at that time I was petrified. I was like, what is going on here? But I went to the specialists, and they just said that you've got an issue with a valve in your heart. 1% of the population have got it, but it won't stop you playing football. So I got given the all clear to go and play football. But no, it's the level that I've played at. If I look through the clubs, that you get extensive medicals on, like, your hands, even, your feet, your ankles, your knees, but nothing on the heart. And it was just all like exterior, if you like, medical. So it was like, you get your ankles and your knees tested. But yeah, strangely enough, I wasn't scanned for about 10, 12 years. So
was it the same problem? Did
No.
it link, or was it just completely different?
It wasn't the same problem, but whether one has caused the other, they can't be sure, because there's a 12-year gap where I've not got any data from. Nothing's been seen, so
Madness, really.
Not sure if it came on rapidly or if it's something that's gradually got worse throughout my career. But it's something that until I'd actually stopped playing and started thinking back, I'd always had moments in games or in training where I'd go a little bit dizzy or lightheaded, and whether that's anything to do with it, I'm not too sure. But I just thought, I think a lot of people get it, if you run too much in pre-season or something like that. But I was probably getting it more regular than I should have done. But it's not something I even paid much attention to. I just thought, I was out of breath, I was working hard and that kind of thing. So it was just natural, and it happened to everyone really. So something that I didn't really think of until I retired. I was like, oh, actually, that might have been like a little warning sign maybe.
And then obviously that's a difficult time for you. You kind of a club that are doing well and you're doing well, and you've kind of forged out the career that you wanted. How difficult was that over that period where you're being told, no, you can't do this anymore, it's not safe?
Yeah, it was tough. I was captain at the time at Newport as well, so I really established myself there quite early. And it's probably the most I was ever enjoying football. I loved it there. It's just something that was so out of the blue. I still find it hard to explain, but just I think one of the hardest bits was when I was told I had to retire by the general cardiologist, and then I had a 2-week gap of when I got results back from the specialist. So that 2 weeks I was in complete limbo whether I was going to have to definitely retire or if I had a bit of hope in coming back. But I was just so anxious, I couldn't sleep, overthinking like, what am I going to do next? How am I going to, this is the only thing I've ever done as a career. What am I going to do next? I wasn't prepared, I don't think, enough, which is something I want to help people with going forward. But yeah, it was just anxious and worried, and probably the best thing about it was my wife was pregnant, so she was 7 or 8 months pregnant by the time I had to retire, and it just gave me a completely different perspective on life. That I was about to become a dad, and gave me a new focus. And at first, I was like, thinking this is unfair, and why is this happening? And I should have at least 6 or 7 years left of a career and that kind of stuff. But probably made me the other way, where now I look back and I'm grateful that I've had. I've been a full-time footballer near enough for 12 years now. I've managed to have the career I've had and come away from the game healthy. I can lead a healthy lifestyle now, and I think becoming a dad gave me that new perspective on it, and I almost just felt grateful that I'd had the time I'd had. And this wasn't, it could have been the case at 16 this was picked up and I'd never experienced anything I have done. So. And
how long did it take you to have that perspective? Because obviously that's a real positive perspective to have.
Yeah. No, it did take me a while initially, but as I say, I think just becoming a dad gave me a different perspective on life, and almost had the mentality of, right, this day was always going to come that I'd have to retire. It's come, a lot sooner than I'd hoped, and not in the circumstances I'd hoped, but it was always going to come. So now, the main thing is nothing happened. If I didn't contract this infection around the heart, then it never would have got scanned, and something, fatal might have happened on the pitch. So we never know. So I can be grateful that I've stepped away from the game healthy, and, grateful for the experiences that football's given me, really.
And you can be a dad and whatnot, and imagine, and a husband, and all that type of stuff. And then did you get any help with the transition away from football? Because obviously, as you said, it's a shock. It's March. It's, getting down to the business end of a season, if you like, and you wouldn't have any plans to be doing anything else. Did you get any help with that transition away? Did you get any support with that?
I think the main support I got was from the football club at Newport. They were brilliant with me. One of my main initial worries was obviously financially, but they assured me, they'd give me a little bit of time under the contract I was still on to, try and figure out what I was going to do next and that kind of thing. So they were brilliant with me, because, as I say, I was so anxious at the time, and any little thing that everything was a little worry. So that was like a little one I could tick off for a few months and could give me a bit of time. In terms of help from like the PFA and stuff, I think with the PFA you have to reach out to them. I didn't get anything coming from them saying, can we help you with anything? Or anything like that. But I did reach out to them to try and look at some courses I could go on and enroll at university, which really helped. I wouldn't have been able to afford it, but they helped me fund doing the master's degree at university. But yeah, it's something that I think football is so demanding then, and coaches in football are so demanding that everything's football, 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 and everything away from football is seen as a distraction. Or I've seen players try and do things away from football, or be on a coach journey and they're doing some coursework or something, and the manager's like, "What are you doing that for? You want to work on your first touch first, or something like that," and make little remarks like that. And it's always, I don't know, I always had the mentality of if I'm doing something away from football, that means I'm not dedicating my time to football, so it's going to be a distraction. So I wasn't prepared, and it's something I think a lot more needs to be done around it, because there's a generation of players that are retiring and have no idea what they want to do next, and no real life skills of how to go about what they're going to do next either. And it's not even a case of players at my level. I've seen Premier League players that I've spoken to who are financially set for life, but are really struggling just because you come away from football and they've got no purpose and they've got nothing to get them up in the morning. And some of them have got all the money in the world, but that's it. They feel like they're a has-been footballer and they've got nothing left to achieve. Where I just think I think you can, working with young players, I'd always encourage having interest away from football. And as I said, it can help when you're not 100% football 24/7, because as I say, I was that, and when I'd had a bad game, I'd take it home with me. Where sometimes if you have got other interests, it's a switch off away from football and something else to focus on.
That drive that you had for football was now kind of being placed in maybe a different area of it. You mentioned kind of right at the start of this that you doing a little bit of work for Bristol City in terms of scouting, and doing a little bit of work with Premier League clubs, and going in and doing talks around social media and that. How have you found kind of that transition? And is there any skills that you found are really easily transferable, or is there anything that's really challenged you in that context?
I think the main difference for me at the start was routine. I think the work I'm doing now it's not like a 9 to 5 office where I've not got a workplace. So a lot of my days are working from home or going into an academy or going into a football club. I think the routine of being a footballer, every single day where you need to be. You're told what time to be there, how long you're going to be there. Everything is so planned. And for me, in 2 weeks' time, you're going to be up north for a day and that kind of thing. And for me, that was probably the hardest part, is getting that routine. And I think the routine is the key, because at first, I was getting out of bed late and I was eating what I wanted because, I didn't need to keep in shape anymore because I wasn't, going to be an athlete. I was drinking more than I ever did, things like that. But, I quickly, my wife quickly got me out of that. I just got a routine, and, I like to get up early, and I'm quite an active person. But it's just creating your day, really. So I like to, get up and I try and keep a structure in place. And it is something that you don't, in football, it's there for you. When you step away from it, you've got to fend for yourself. So it does make being a footballer look really simple when you do step out into the real world. But there's definitely a lot of transferable skills, and that's why I think a lot needs to be done in helping young footballers, because they do have so much more to offer in other industries. When they do leave the game, things like teamwork, leadership, being driven. Like no matter how talented you are, to become a professional footballer, you have to have some kind of drive and want to be better than other people and compete. And there's so much footballers can do away from football and other industries that can go a long way.
Do you wish you'd branched out when you were still playing, when you were younger?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was just I was never open minded. I was never. It's quite embarrassing to even think of now that I was. If anyone had like a job away from football, I wasn't even interested. Like, they weren't interested into me. I don't like even other sports. I'd never even looked into other sports and how they do things. It was just everything was just football, and I wish I'd have been a little bit more open minded, because I think having that, I could have taken bits from other sports and other industries and learned from other people and took it into football. But yeah, it's definitely something. It was never pushed onto me in the football industry that I was in, or encouraged. So naturally, you didn't go towards it. But it's definitely something I wish I would have done younger. Yeah.
And then, obviously, you mentioned earlier about the Bristol City scouting role. How do you find being on the other side of the fence? Obviously, you've gone from being the one who's just playing and being judged to now you're being the one who's judging people, if you like. How have you found that that kind of development, and have you enjoyed it?
I have, yeah. It is completely different, and you watch football completely different. For me, we've got at Bristol a way of playing and a brief for the kind of player that the manager wants to bring in. So I'm given almost like a checklist of what this player has to have if he's going to come in. But it is, yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and it's, I've watched, from non-league football to Premier League football this season, watched different countries and stuff like that. So I want to remain in football in some capacity. I'm still not 100% sure what it looks like long term going forward. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the scouting side, and it does make you watch football in a completely different way when if I was to scout myself from when I was playing, it would just make me look completely different of what clubs are actually looking for at the elite level.
Is there anything that if you scouted yourself or you look back at, you would have gone, I should have worked on this area that I wasn't aware of at the time?
I think my main flaws were more physical, and I think I think I tried to work on it so much I was always mobile, but I was never quick, and I was never a strong, big, dominant centre back. But I think sometimes you can look at, a lot of kids now will want to look at Van Dijk, and I think Jamie Carragher was talking about it the other day. Some kids will never be able to play like he does because they've not got his physical attributes. So you've got to use what you've got. Van Dijk can come over the top and header it, beat anyone in the air. For me, I was 6'2", but quite slim, and you come against big strikers at 6'5", you've got to be clever. And so I had to use what I got, and I do feel like, although I probably lacked in the physical department, I had to, it gave me, I had to problem solve and use what I had, and try and use other ways of putting a striker off in the air or nicking in front and things like that. So, but no, as I say, I think physically, I just wasn't naturally gifted in that department, really.
And then do you have a process when you're going to a game? Like, do you get there early and watch warm-ups? Do you watch them coming in? Do you just watch the game? Like, how does that look on a game day basis?
It does differ. Sometimes you're covering a morning game and then going to a first team game, so you don't get the time for that. But ideally, I like to get there early. You're usually sat with other scouts and other people in football, so again, I like to speak to them and see what's going on at their clubs, and different people in different roles. But yeah, as I said, I like to try and keep a routine of as if I'm playing, so I like to get there quite early, and it's like a match day for me on a Saturday. So that part of it I really enjoy.
And then obviously we skipped over this slightly earlier on, but you mentioned kind of playing Man City when at Newport. I imagine for you that must have been an amazing experience, but again, amazing learning experience, competing against some of the best players in the country and with Pep and stuff. How was it, and was there anything that you particularly learned that you took away from that game, going like the top players do this, or you don't see this on TV, but like they do this really well?
I think Because before that we played Leicester in the third round, and that was one of the best days I've had in football. That where I had all my family there, and we beat them on TV and stuff. So that was unbelievable. And then it set up the Man City game, and just to even be on the same pitch as like David Silva and Sane and just I think the main difference was just they make everything look so simple, and they do everything with pace and purpose. We had one of the worst pitches in the league at Newport, and they played as if it was Wembley. Everything they did, they took care of it, and I just think the speed that they do things and the way they control the ball and manipulate it is just frightening. And it was just doing the simple things well and at pace that separated them from us, really. But we gave them a good game. It was 0-0 at half time, and then we pulled it back to 2-1 in stoppage time, and then they ended up going up the other end and scoring. But it was something they would not have enjoyed playing on that pitch, but they just made it look so simple and effortless and just kept the ball so well. But yeah, it's just I think when it comes to the end of your career, and you can say you was on the same pitch as some of them players, and yeah, so it was a good day.
Cool. So last question, which is I ask this to everyone, which is who's the best player you've played with or against, or manager you've played with or against, and why?
Best player I played with is probably, I'd say, Joby McAnuff. So I played with him at Stevenage, and he's another one he's been at the top flight and been a Premier League player. So he came to us when he was at the back end of his career, but just to play with him, and just so much quality on and off the pitch, and as a person as well, just so professional, proper leader, brilliant with young players. He was a Jamaican international at the time. He actually he's got a great photo where he's played against Messi when he was at Argentina, and they swapped shirts at the end of the game, and Messi actually asks for Joby's shirt, which is an honour for anyone, I think. But I do think he's the best I've played with, just as an all-round professional. And then against, you can take anyone from that Man City game, but the person who's probably given me the hardest game, I played against Stoke when Peter Crouch was up front, and he scored a hat-trick against me. Literally peeled onto me for 3 headers. And he gave me a tough afternoon. So I'd say he's probably, as a performance-wise, he's probably the hardest I played against. I have to go with a manager that I've managed against. I have to say Pep, because I managed to do that last season. So I don't think there's many that are going to beat him. And then manager has been my manager, I'd probably say Jamie Day, who was my Welling manager. Just think he was the perfect manager for me at that point in my career, where I probably could have slipped away, drifted out of football, really. But he saved me and got my career back on track. So I'd say he's the best manager I've worked with.
Cool. Well, listen, Fraser, I really appreciate you giving up quite a bit of your time to kind of talk through everything there, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing well and you and the family are safe and whatnot. So fingers crossed everything keeps going in that direction. I'm sure via Robin and whatnot we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah. No, cheers for that, mate. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.